Hello. Let's see here. It's 3 so far. Well, thank you who are here. And I want to start off. Are there any questions? Anything that I need to be aware of that I haven't put online or something that I haven't made clear?
I did have one question. So let me go to Canvas real quick.
Sure.
So the quiz, from my understanding, it says it has 5 questions.
Yes, sir.
And to look at the questions, it says to go to an area where it says questions, but I don't see where that is.
Oh, shoot. Okay. Yeah, because I only know my side, the faculty side of it. When I hit on that on the first quiz, up on the top, I have an option that says, write in your instructions, write in the material, and they're just like blue options at the very top in the middle. Um, and also in blue to the right of subject matter is on my side, on my faculty end of things. It actually says questions, so I have to hit on that blue questions, and then it gives me the option to write out the questions. So they are separate from where you open it up and you get my instructions. So I don't know if I've helped you at all, but I just know that, like I said, once you hit on quiz one and you see my instructions, try to find the option to hit questions themselves.
Yeah. I tried doing that and I couldn't find anything, and there's no link in the area where it says instructions. So that's why I wanted to ask.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what. I mean, is there anyone else who could help him out, as far as how you've been able to do it? If you maybe have taken it so far this week. Okay, so it's all right. So if not, okay, I'll tell you what, Chris. I will add the link to it. You may not be able to submit it though, just off my link, but we'll figure something out. Even if you have to just, only 5 questions, even if you have to just look at the link in worst case scenario and Canvas message me and tell me, all right, my answers, Mr. Cal, 1 through 5 are B, D, A, C, A, or something like that. Uh, but please, yeah, do your best to try to find the questions. That's a great question. I mean, because this is only my second, or actually now my third, so I'm without excuse. But semester doing things online myself, and so I only know what's on my side. When I log in as adjunct faculty. So I wish I could help you more, Chris, but presently all I could do is maybe call a couple people and try to get some information, some help, some advice.
Yeah, because from understanding, the link that you wanted to put was just to see the questions themselves, and that's something that I can't say.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, I will make a note. Right now, I'm making a note, and I'm just gonna just in case, worst case scenario, until we get the wrinkles out of this. I think I'm going to post an attachment of the quiz.
From my understanding, I believe that when you open up the quiz, you have to press take the quiz, and then you're going to be able to see the section where it says questions. And to go back on the quiz, well, it's unlimited. So we have the option to go back on. All you have to do is just press take the quiz, and you'll be able to see.
Good.
That sounds right.
Yeah, I mean, right now, I mean, that would work, but later on during the semester, when we only have one chance to take the quiz, we can't just leave it and then come back.
Right, that's true. Once you open it, you have to start, I believe. Depending.
Yes, so that's why I wanted to get this clarified now, so then we don't have to run into those problems later on.
Right. Yeah, you only have what about 6 quizzes, and at least the first two I'm gonna let you. And then remember they're every other topic. So the next quiz number 2 should be not but 2 weeks from now. I'll probably also let you have unlimited attempts at that one as well.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so I have participants 9, that includes me, and I have 8 names. So good. I believe I have everyone to get your credit. And yeah, please note, right? Goodness, 13 times 5. It's a good thing I don't teach math. 65 points. 5 points each time, you guys. That's the equivalent of doing an extra credit assignment, a 50-point assignment, and then 15 more. So you can get 65 extra points doing these Zoom meetings. So I hope this helps. And again, I apologize to those who can't make it at this time. I really do. I understand people are working and have other responsibilities. That stinks. But I also will have an extra credit assignment that I'll put up, and you guys have all semester to do it until the end. Okay, it'll be an argumentative write-up of a topic of your choice. I believe I have about literally 22 different options from which you can choose if you wanted to do that extra credit assignment, and it's worth 50 points like any other assignment. But when I do the total possible points at the end of the year, obviously those 50 won't be a part of the total possible. So whatever you get, you get a 35 out of 50, that's 35 just extra credit points. So I would highly recommend doing that.
I have a question for the people that, can't do the Wednesdays. Aren't you recording our Zooms and posting links?
I am, yes.
Yeah, so they
Yeah.
can find them on there and see the same thing just without the credit.
Exactly.
Okay, oh good. Okay, I just wanted to verify that. I didn't see that, so I didn't need to, so.
No problem. So yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned that. So of course these will be posted, and so everyone should be able to utilize it. So how many of you have read or even done the assignment already for this week? Anybody? That's all right if you
No.
haven't.
Yes, I did.
You did?
I did, yeah. Well,
Good, Polly.
I've already discerned which one I'm gonna do and highlighted and got started on it, but about the other two, so but I thought I wanted to start here and then I'll go back.
You got it. No,
Okay.
Good. So when you get into the second industrial revolution, right? What we're doing today is, like any topic, it has a couple common themes that run, right? That run very commonly in the narratives. So for one, right, like looking at the very first one, number 1 is we pat ourselves on the back for experiencing this industrial revolution. That it wasn't just fortuitous, it wasn't just a global movement, but that we created a fertile soil. We created circumstances and context from which the industrial revolution could just flower and bloom in this country, right? So this is court history, right? Praising the establishment, praising our founding fathers, et cetera, right? So what you look at is just kind of a recipe, if you will. Firstly, right, is we love ourselves some capitalism in this country, right? Although that the pendulum has definitely swung in academia. I think what's really strong now in academia, we're going to get to very soon, is the progressive movement. The idea that the capitalist system needs government intervention, especially for the proverbial underdogs. So at any rate, though, going backwards from before the progressive movement and its influence today, is there's a praise, right, that capitalism is the greatest, most fertile soil from which economic prosperity can grow. For one, right, with capitalism, is you're allowing a lot of individual and corporate, for that matter, liberty. People can choose whatever they want to do in a capitalist economy for a living, whatever field you want to get involved in, whatever, like, so much is left to you, right? And so in the 1800s, it was really big. It was called classical liberalism. And classical liberalism was big about you doing your thing. I myself can do my thing. And as long as we don't infringe upon each other's rights, then it's all good. We coexist. You do your thing, I do mine, et cetera, et cetera. So with capitalism, right, there's this degree of alleged freedom that the individual has, that is something of which historians have boasted in the past, American historians, right? And so not only that, but the idea that there is such a thing as human nature, right? What was it? The utilitarians and the classical liberals were both really big in the 1800s, and they both took as an axiom, an assumption that you don't even question, is people care about themselves and their own self-interest first and foremost. That you put a roof on fire in a public building, people are going to look for their family members. People are going to look for their way out before they necessarily start looking to help others. That it is an inherent instinct in man. And Darwinism was big in the 1800s too. And Darwinism was very, in many ways, kind of amoral, right? It didn't look at ethics too much. It was just, hey, it is what it is. People gobble one another up. People worry about their own survival first. So some people believe that capitalism is the most congruent, right? It's the most amenable or compatible with human nature. It is who we are, so you might as well go with it and not try to change it. As opposed to some forms of Marxism, right? Where people are supposed to cooperate and not compete, and put the good of the general well-being ahead of their own. To a court American historians, that's naive. And they think that the American system has it right in opening up competition and individual freedom in capitalism, and letting people follow their ambition, and yes, even greed. And so so when you look at number one, you're looking for ways in which the writer is trying to pat America on the back for making the economy do as well as it did in the late 1800s. And by doing as well as it did, that's argumentative, right? Because what indicators are you using? They're looking at mass stats like the gross national product, right? The value of all the products that are being produced in the country at a given time. The number of commodities out on the market being bought and sold, right? The percentage of workers and number of workers who have a job and have some type of income, right? So the standard indicators that we still use to this day are being applied here, right? But notice what is not spoken is disparity of wealth, right? During the Industrial Revolution, the gap between the rich and the poor, it seems like we have the stats to prove it, got much worse, much more inequitable, where a small group of titans just took over entire industries, right? You had Rockefeller and oil, Carnegie and steel, James Duke with tobacco, Frederick Weyerhaeuser with lumber, Cyrus McCormick with farm machinery. And it just, I mean, you had just a single corporation, in some cases, a single individual that seemed to just really run the show in a given industry. I kid you not, when we had a panic in 1873 and then a depression in 1893, people asked about 4 individuals to help the stock market and bail us out. 4 individuals, wealthy individuals. They asked to buy a bunch of stock and help save certain, certain shares in certain key industries. And those were, by the way, JP Morgan, international financier, Jay Cook, international financier, and gosh, arguably, who else did they put pressure on? Like I said, I mean, literally about 4 people. And so, at any rate, that is, yes, Paulie.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just kind of like, when I come across things like this that you're talking about, it just reflects like the same thing we're going through today, where they're depending on, our major like Google, Amazon, or Microsoft to bail us out and buy, to buy this or buy that. The same type of situation to me, it seems, repeating.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Paulie. No, thank you for raising your hand on that. I love that. And yeah, absolutely. We see it today for sure, right? And the argument oftentimes is the same, is that they are providing more convenience to our lives. They are, the same type of arguments as far as the benefits that they're bringing to society was being made back at the Gilded Age. Just a different list of names, a different list of companies, but the same old topic, the same old theme. You're absolutely right. And if you were to be brought up like in the Soviet Union during the Cold War, right? That's the first characteristic that they note of a capitalistic economy, is they call it a plutocracy. It's ruled by the wealthiest, right? The big international corporate giants run the roost like an oligarchy, right? A few people rolling at the expense of everyone else. And oftentimes, they've made the same arguments, right? That they're making, they're providing a good or service or product that people greatly demand and need. They're improving the standard of living, right? Today you can't go without talking about the benefits, the alleged benefits technologically, right, that we live under now, as far as breakthroughs in communication. But you have the same arguments of them exploiting their laborers and not giving them truly a lot of latitude to move up the ladder in their corporate structures, gobbling up the competition and virtually having a monopoly in whatever it is, whatever industry that they're in, and whatever product that they're providing. And to some people, right, like the progressives that I mentioned, a monopoly is never, to them, can never be construed as a good thing. That anyone having that much hegemony, domination in an entire industry with a product, etc., you're at that company's mercy. And so you're absolutely right, Paulie. This is so relevant, so relevant. And then not to mention, right, the argument that the government is going to subsidize, right? It's going to bail out, right, certain industries, certain companies, with the argument that doing so is going to have a positive, healthy domino effect on the entire economy, right? And so there's an expression they used from the 50s, what's good for General Motors is good for America. That's a very conservative argument, right? That General Motors provided so many jobs and provided so many automobiles, and then the domino effect of people owning vehicles for the first time in mass, that was good for America. And so hence it was okay for the government to give these lucrative contracts and subsidies to General Motors. And you see common arguments today, right? Absolutely. We all remember with the 2008 house bubble, and then certain big, the Fannie Mae's and getting bailed out, getting helped, supposedly for all of the people who defaulted on their mortgage during that bubble. So absolutely. So with number one, you're looking at a rose-colored account saying how wonderful it was that that American leaders had the foresight to create a system that is amenable with human nature, that they subsidized and helped out key industries like mining and railroads and communications and transportation, that was good for the entire economy. Diversification. I remember just, it wasn't even a decade ago, and the federal government was offering subsidies to people moving into the Silicon Valley and engaging in new technological inventions, that the government was going to make it worth their while, because supposedly we're, falling behind certain other countries, and we were wanting that for big reasons, right? For the whole economy, the national economy, etc. And so you see that on number one. You look at also, it not only pats the back of American government leaders, etc., right? But also of the big businesses. It pats their back also and shows how they were at the avant-garde. They were at the front, right, of new technological inventions. For instance, interchangeable parts, assembly line production. That's really not going to really materialize well until the 1920s, arguably, like with Henry Ford's automobile factories. But the beginnings, the origins of it had definitely already begun in the Gilded Age. Matter of fact, we made the most money selling globally. What is it? Lathes, Lathes. I don't even know what they are. Planers, Planers, and these different machine tools. They were like our best sellers, because now everyone was beginning to standardize with machines, right? Machine assembly line production, using interchangeable parts, etc. And as far as efficiency, the day of the artisan, right? The skilled worker who, makes a motorcycle, a custom-made motorcycle by himself, right? As opposed to an assembly line that shoots off a Harley Davidson or whatever kind of motorcycle, right? Every 47 seconds. How do you compete with that, right? Economies of scale. You outproduce your small guys, your small competitors so greatly in quantity that you just undersell them. The guy who makes the one motorcycle and it takes him a month to make, right? He can't go lower than a certain price or he loses all his money. And the big guys can afford to kind of pull a Walmart on you and put their price lower than yours, especially with the mass number that they're dealing with, right? And they could even experience short-term losses, and they could weather the storm because they have a lot more money to play with, right? And then not to mention people going public in the stock market. So now anyone throughout the world can buy shares in your stock, and that gives you more money to play with, right? So you could buy better machinery, you could hire more workers, you could engage in research and development, like you see, like Nikola Tesla, right? Under Thomas Edison, he was found in a European college classroom to be absolutely brilliant in questioning and even stunting Professor Mach. That Mach speed has been named after. And they're like, who is this kid, right? And so they paid for him to go to Paris and work in one of Edison's, one of the research and development laboratories. So, only the big guys can afford to do that, could hire these, brainiacs to tinker around the clock and pay them salaries, right? Another example of the benefit of doing that, right, would be streamlining production. When you streamline production, you cut out all the fat. You get right to the basics of construction and of whatever product you're making, and you do it much more quickly, much more cheaply, right? And just more effectively, of a higher quality. And so Rockefeller, that guy spent the money. He had the money and he spent the money, right? To streamline the process of refining oil, so that nothing was to go to waste. And so he made his own barrels because he didn't like to be at the mercy of any middlemen. So he stored his own stuff. He refined his own stuff. He sold his own stuff. He bought a majority share in the railroads that in different steamer companies that he would need to bring the oil from point A to point B, etc. Again, so that he could control every part of the process. He ended up making just dozens of byproducts from the refining process instead of just throwing the refuse away, right? He made use of it and turned it into a couple dozen products that he sold on the side. And so where am I going with this is I'm simultaneously kind of mentioning the fact that the big guys had an unfair advantage over their smaller competitors, but also the big guys made some very shrewd, very intelligent decisions and went through certain efforts that anyone else technically could have done, but they didn't, right? And that's going on to another number. So with number one, we're patting ourselves on the back as a country. We're contending that the conditions were ripe. It was easy, progressively easier to get a loan. It was progressively easier to start a business charter from the state government. It was with a corporation. Now there's a lot more money to play with, right? As far as capital enrichment. And so, but then you run into the next number of saying, wait a minute, capitalism is too Darwinian. The big guys are going to gobble up the little guys. And it's not only unhealthy when that happens, right? Where you have this plutocracy, the rule by the wealthy, but that also that there's something, it seems like there's something un-American and unfair about it, right? Because we're so big in tying our national identity into the idea of meritocracy. You get what you merit, what you earn, that this is the land of the American dream. If you work hard enough and you're bright and sharp enough and talented enough and hardworking enough, the sky's the limit in this country, right? But some people, like I said, like the Progressive Party and the Progressive Movement and those and the Democratic Party today who identify themselves as progressives, is they say, no, the capitalist system is too Darwinian. It's too unfair. The government needs to intervene on behalf of the smaller guy, right? On behalf of the smaller guy. And so labor strife. Look up the railroad strike of 1877. It's known as the Great Railroad Strike of 1877. Look up the Homestead Strike of 1892. Look up the Pullman Strike of 1894. These were strikes, you guys, that ended up becoming rather large, and the number of people that got involved in violent confrontation, the scope of government having to intervene and keep violence from escalating, and also, right, the extent to which the employers, the bosses, the capitalists, as they were called, right, the Carnegies and Rockefellers, and then their laborers, that it progressively began to be seen in the Gilded Age that they were at war with one another, that this was not just a system that was a free-for-all for everybody, equality of opportunity, right? A premise of capitalism is that you think of yourself first, I think of myself first, but somehow it works, right? You think of like someone who sees some people playing basketball out on a hot day and they don't seem to have anything to drink. And that person may not care at all that they're thirsty, but just want to enrich himself by selling some Gatorade to him. And then they don't care about helping out that guy per se and giving him their money. They just want some Gatorade. That's probably a cheesy example and simplistic example, but the idea is in capitalism, it's supposed to work. That what is it, the Finding Nemo or whatever, everyone could walk around and say mine, 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 but somehow it works out in a capitalist system, right? But with the progressive movement and others at this time when these labor strikes were going on, they started questioning that premise and saying, no, I don't buy that anymore. I think capitalism is about warring classes that are their relationship is parasitical. For one to benefit, it must be at the expense of someone else, right? And think of something as simple as overhead for an employer, right? Is when an employer is in a price war with a competitor and he crunches his numbers, right? And he could only go so low for the price of his product before he actually loses his money, right? So he can only go that low. What will give him some wiggle room to be able to go a little lower with his price? And we're assuming, right, that people will habitually buy the cheaper product if the two products are relatively comparable in quality, right? That people are going to go for the better deal. So let's say you feel, I'm sorry?
Bring down the overhead, right?
That's right. Is the best way to be able to go even lower with your price is to cut your overhead, cut your expenses. And so what does that include? That's going to include at this time period, laying off workers, giving them pay cuts and paying them less with their salary, right? You have to make those types of decisions. And so some people, like there's a guy named Alan Trachtenberg, Trachtenberg, or URG, at any rate, ERG, Alan Trachtenberg, is what he pretty much says in his famous writing on the Gilded Age, is he says basically, don't hate the winners, hate the system. That the system is set up in such a way that it's so competitive that for anyone to do well, he has to be rather ruthless in his tactics as a CEO, etc. Right? So it's something to think about, the Trachtenberg thesis, that the system itself, that competition itself globally, when you're going to have recessions and deflation, where you're going to have lower prices for your product and not make as much, right, off your sales, etc. That there are international factors involved that put pressure on you to cut corners. And of course, that's going to include laying workers off at times or paying them less than you had previously paid them. And so at any rate, like I said, I would invite you to look up those three famous strikes, if you will. Another one, a fourth one, is the Haymarket Square riot. There are a group of people saying that the system is rigged. Only the employers, the Rockefellers and Carnegies, stand to win and gain at the expense of the common man. And the police came in because there were a few Marxist speakers who called for a war against the powers that be, right? A violent uprising on behalf of the manual laborer, the proletariat, right? The manual worker in this industrial economy. And so the police came and said, you have just violated your First Amendment right. You have promoted violence against the establishment. You must break this rally up. And someone threw a homemade bomb and killed 7 police officers. And so just from the words, because no one was able to catch who had thrown the bomb, from the words alone of some of the speakers, they tried to have them executed for inciting this with their words. So very fascinating case, the Haymarket Square riot.
Once again, very familiar with President Trump inciting violence.
Yeah, for sure. And it's something, it's definitely relevant to this very day, this type of discourse where some people say, hey, we have the best country in the world. This is still the land of opportunity. You look at how many people now are getting college degrees, right? As your avenue to the American dream. If you guys didn't believe in the American dream, I wouldn't think that, I mean, granted, I hope some of you love to learn for its own sake, but I would imagine, because God knows I'm a nerd, I love to read and learn for its own sake in certain subjects. But I darn sure expected to be able to get a marketable job after I got my degrees. And so, so I'd imagine it's no different with you. And so, but then some people, right? You have your Bernie Sanders, right? Contending that the system is rigged. The big guys are dominating at the expense of the common man, and the government needs to come in and kind of use its muscle to kind of hold accountable the bully, the plutocratic bully. And the names are different, but it's the same thing. We definitely have our Rockefellers and Carnegies today, as Polly mentioned. So any comments or questions so far? All right. All right. So at any rate, let me let's see here. What I was going to do is share the screen. Let's take a look at the Gilded Age. All right. So fertile soil thesis, I've done that one to death. Capitalism as unfair and rigged. I feel like I've done that one as well. And remember also, right, there's a term that they also use, two more terms, if you'll bear with me, right? Is one you see here on the page, glass ceiling. They've used this oftentimes for women, right? Is that there may not be an actual law that states you can't pay women the same as men. It is legally, acknowledged that that you can pay a woman less. No, they're not going to be that overt about it, right? But they just simply find a way around it and don't pay women the same salaries for the same jobs. And so that glass ceiling, right? It's not technically there legally. You can't find it and prove it in a court of law, but it's there nevertheless, right? And so, you have people, I know of cases of people working for 30, 40 years, right? As an industrial laborer in a factory, in a mass producing factory. And then them attaining a foreman status, right? Like a middleman management status. And then shortly thereafter, the company was bought by another, bought out. And that person's benefits, retirement package was not acknowledged by the new employer. And that person was not only let off, but that person had to train his replacement, right? So just classic, just exploitation of workers, of them putting in years and years, right, heart and soul into their job. And that kind of rhetorical question: you love your job, well, how much does your job love you back, right? And so you're going to find that not just obviously in a capitalist economy, but especially in a post-industrial revolution economy, right? That notion. And Marxists write about the alienation of the worker, the alienation, right? That the worker is progressively alienated from the benefits of his labor, right? So for one, self-identity. A lot of people to this day, their last name in early modern or medieval history was tied to what their family did for a living, right? That's a case in many cases. So at any rate, that was your identity. You worked as a family. You learned your trade, and you put value in how well you made that product or that service, right? That you offered, because your village reputation depended upon it, and your livelihood, et cetera, et cetera. But now in industrial economy, right, is that the machines are doing most of the work. and you're doing a very monotonous job of just, poking the lid on a bottle or whatever it might be, right? A very tedious, easy, but monotonous job over and over and over. The idea is you're alienated. It no longer is tied to your identity. It's just a means to an end. You can't wait to get out of there and so forth, right? And some people even go a little bit conspiracy theory in the Gilded Age, is you have the beginnings of like amusement parks, like Coney Island in New York, Nickelodeons, like the early movie theaters, and other types, basically a strip mall. The first shopping malls came at this time during the Gilded Age, right? And then also, as did professional sports, the Major League Baseball, for instance, boxing. And so at any rate, right, you look at, to this very day, right, Mercedes-Benz Stadium is a popular NFL football stadium. So many stadiums and others, right, are literally named after an oligarchic giant international corporation, right? So some people contend, and I find this a fascinating topic, is that when these rebellions, these violent strikes, and people unionizing in a way that was very confrontational against their bosses, right? That, what do you know, these big corporations and state level governments began establishing ways by which the worker could let off steam on the weekend, right? Not to mention a modern notion of the weekend and not just Sunday or the Sabbath off, coming from medieval Europe. And so at any rate, the idea of having a 2-day weekend and be able to have catharsis, right? Like catharsis is like punching a punching bag, a healthy way of getting out negative emotions, right? So that if people are becoming alienated from their job at work, and there is a glass ceiling, and they're increasingly knowledgeable of the fact, cognizant of the fact that they're likely going to do the same thing for a living for the rest of their lives, and they're not going to ever join the ranks of their bosses. Do you need a way to help them let off their steam on the weekend and make money from it, right? The very salaries that you're paying your workers, they're going to give it back to you when they go to your movie theater, when they go to your amusement park, when they pay for a ticket to watch the boxing match that you're providing the site for, right?
Wow, that's crazy. That's such a crazy look at that. I never thought of that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel like it's my job to provoke you guys to think, but I assure you, I'm very centrist in my personal politics, as I'm not trying to be a radical rabble rouser right now.
Right, you're not.
But I just think that it's worth mentioning that just to get you to think, get you to read up on that topic, right? I felt like it was thought provocative for me to let you know, because I did too. I grinned from ear to ear and shook my head as I read the first time reading from a book, that thesis. I was like, wow, that has my attention for sure. So so at any rate, it's something to think about. As far, so like I said, the main kind of worldviews that we're getting into are like old school, like libertarian American, right? Conservative American today. The capitalist system is in line with human nature. It's a sine qua non of meritocracy and equality of opportunity, right? And then you're going to have people that are more either Marxist or at least progressive, saying, no, the system is parasitical, it's rigged. The big guys are bound to win. The American dream is somewhat of a deliberate sham, because after all, right, if it stands in your best interest as the Rockefeller employee to keep wages low and to keep your laborers from rising up, right? Either literally in rebellion and unionizing and striking, or rising up and having to pay them as special skilled laborers, right? Because you don't want to be at the mercy of any of your laborers. That's why it was best for the bosses to have machines do the hard work, so that sadly, right, your workers become expendable. If the job that they're doing is easy and monotonous, and the machine's doing most of the complicated work, if they don't like it, they could leave and you could hire virtually anybody else to do the same thing. But it's when you have the skilled laborers who have, like, the engineers on the railroads and so forth, right? Those before the Bessemer oven, who could make iron into steel, and they knew the secrets of those processes. Those guys, as you would guess, they threw their weight around. They demanded to be paid 3 times, if not more, what the average worker was doing. They would threaten to walk off the site if they didn't have their needs met and their demands met. And so the employers got tired of that, and they wanted to do just the opposite. They wanted to make all their laborers expendable and replaceable. And so machines do that, right? The sophistication of the production process is going to arguably, um, decrease the power, the leverage of the common worker. So it's something to think about. All right. And then the fact that the government, right? The government on multiple occasions during these strikes, you look into those strikes that I mentioned, pretty much without exception, the state and sometimes even the federal government intervened on behalf of the employers, the wealthy bosses, right? And of course, it was a very simplistic argument, was that in those cases, the strikers had violated the Fifth and 14th Amendment rights of their bosses, the right to their property, because they began destroying their boss's property in these strikes. And so in the name of law and order, etc., right, the state level government sent in militia, and the federal government sent in actual troops in some of these cases. So again, why does it seem like the government is always helping out and there to help out the employers, the big corporate guys? Of course, in the time of Alexander Hamilton, they contend that what's good for big business is good for the entire country. We've already gone over that. And so, of course, that was a long-held, argument that the government at different levels has made. But some people believe it's more cynical than that, right? Is that you look at cases like the Credit Mobilier scandal. The government was giving, right, millions of dollars to the railroads and millions of acres to the railroads to make it worth their while to extend telecommunications and transportation across the country, which they claim would help the entire country in multiple ways, right? But in doing that, the Union Pacific made up a phony construction company called Credit Mobilier, which they themselves were the owners of, and they paid themselves those congressional subsidies, and never even built the bridges that they claimed that they were going to build. So here they are getting extra money from Congress to engage in these fictitious constructive projects that never even happen, and they're just pocketing that money personally instead of for the common good, the common welfare. Then if that were not bad enough, right, when the House committee and a couple Senate committees began to investigate, lots of congressmen, what do you know, owned shares suddenly in the Union Pacific. They were bribed. They were bribed to go along with this sham by enriching themselves, right? They were bought by the Union Pacific. And so to some people, right, they believe that the federal government is sides under the assumption that there is class conflict, right? And there is somewhat of a parasitical relationship between employers and employees, that they side with the employers not just because they believe it's in the best interest of the country, but because they are in cahoots with them. And then not to mention at that time, you could find evidence at the Ivy League schools that were churning out the Supreme Court justices and a lot of the leaders and key policymakers of the Gilded Age. They were getting a very conservative education in the Ivy League schools, saying, again, what's good for business, big business is good for America, that the system's not parasitical, that the big guys won fair and square. And what I love, right, is no matter how much you feel like the competition became unfair with people like Rockefeller and Carnegie, look at their humble origins. There is some truth to the whole rags to riches thing. You look at a biography by Ron Chernow, Chernow. I believe it's called Titan. I have it behind me somewhere. Yeah, it's called Titan, and it's a biography on Rockefeller. And of course, later on, when he becomes very powerful, it is kind of conflict history by Ron Chernow. He is portrayed as kind of a villain. He gobbles up little guys, and they don't stand a chance. But to add complexity to the topic, right? When you look at the early part of the book and the early life of Rockefeller, you look at a degree to which he somewhat earned his way up, right? And so look for evidence of that on one of these numbers, right? Where I try to play devil's advocate. Number 3, winners like Rockefeller at least partially earned their success. And so, someone once boasted, right? You could take money from the rich. You could evenly allocate it to everybody in the country. And within 10 years, let the capitalist system do its thing. Within 10 years, everybody is going to be back where they are today. What does that person mean by that?
It means that the choices that we make with the opportunities that we have are going to affect our overall, if we're going to raise high or we're going to go low,
Yes.
how the decisions and the choices. And maybe that has to do with education or shrewdness or, ruthlessness too, but and what people want and what their values are, where they're going to do with that opportunity, I guess. Is that correct?
Good for you. No, that's absolutely rhetorically what I was wanting to hear. That absolutely.
Because that's the one I'm writing on. So I'm glad I get it.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's a good thing. That's the one that you were already choosing. And you totally get it. That's absolutely the contention, right? Is when you look at personal qualities and choices, right? Rockefeller was a workaholic. So was Carnegie, right? At least in their early days. They went above and beyond in their job, right? The famous case with Rockefeller, he was crunching the numbers at home and realized that he had shorted his company running their tabs, their purchases and expenditures, realized that he had been off by, I kid you not, fewer than $2, which even back then was an incredible amount. And he walked back and opened up the place in the middle of the night to make note of it, to make sure the company got that $1.88 back, right? And so you have people that are depicted as being anomalous, out of the ordinary, just workaholics. Not only that, right? Carnegie, they said that he had such a positive and affable vibe to him that he just invited positive vibes in his own direction, right? And you look up a guy named Thomas Scott. who ended up giving him certain opportunities at the Pennsylvania Railroad. And Thomas Scott just thought the world of young Carnegie and said, this kid stands out. And it's going to be Thomas Scott who gives him his first major skyrocketing promotions through the Pennsylvania Railroad, and also gives him advice as to stock shares to purchase. And Carnegie risked everything. He, as a young man, actually got his parents to sign over as collateral their own home for borrowing the money to purchase the stock. But of course, the stock that because of insider information, sadly, Thomas Scott knew exactly what he was talking about. And I mean, just like that, from American Express and a couple other companies, Carnegie became almost a millionaire. And that's before he even went to Scotland and he learned of the Bessemer ovens. And then he shrewdly made a deal with a guy named, it was kind of a good cop, bad cop thing. His name was Henry Clay Frick. Frick had access to the coal, and the coal, right, was used as a burning fuel in the Bessemer ovens to turn iron into steel. So it was a perfect marriage. Frick was willing to play the ugly guy that would take on the employees if they tried to unionize and strike, and he had access to the coal, and Carnegie had access to the Bessemer ovens, and he brought over a couple skilled laborers. And notice, right, when he did and he bought these ovens, he borrowed money from several people and was in debt until the process worked on his fourth try. He tried 3 different types of earlier ovens that didn't work. So the fourth time was a charm, but he went broke a few times. Rockefeller took great risks when he was managing produce, right? Just farm food, and decided to take a risk in oil. And he took a lot of loans from several people because of his reputation for being a man of integrity. They said, you just look at his picture and he conveys it with the expression on his face. But Rockefeller was definitely a type A personality. Everything was very rigidly right or wrong. He wouldn't drink. He wouldn't cavort with people that he thought were immoral. He never wanted to waste a minute of time. So there is a degree to which you look at the early biographies of some of these people and you're like, wow, this was not an ordinary guy, right? This guy made very shrewd decisions, and in some ways, kind of invited or earned or brought about himself his own good fortune. Any comments on that? That's all right. Okay, and so
I'll save mine for the paper, my paper.
you got it. That sounds great. Yeah, of my 4 classes I've done, I'm almost done with the 3rd class. I don't mean to get you guys last, but matter of fact, I think I've done like the first 10 on your previous assignment. So I'm going to try to keep up with those, okay, and getting them back. But I'm always, almost without exception, pleasantly, I enjoy reading what a lot of you write. I really do.
You're a very fair grader. I appreciate that. You're very yeah. That's all I used to say. You're very a good grader. You take into consideration what your students are learning, and yeah. I wouldn't worry too much about that for most people if they're wanting to see their grades for the total.
Well, thank you. I told her to say that, everybody. You'll get your extra credit points for saying that, right?
No, you get there, it's fair. You'll as long as you understand what he's asking for. Once you get used to that, I think it makes it each one gets easier, right?
I'd like to think so. I definitely like to think so. Because really, every instructor does have his or her own, kind of quirky style. And this is my style that you do get used to, and does seem to be just handled very well, very easily by my students by mid to late semester, for sure. All right, and so that's about all as far as my end, as far as what I wanted to convey as, like, kind of context, right? Surrounding context to how this Gilded Age. I think this Gilded Age is so fascinating. Like I said, you look into some of this labor strife, you look into some of these arguments about capitalism, you look at the biographies of some of these robber barons, if you will, right, or titans of industry, however you want to perceive them, and it's just not boring. It's anything but boring. And I'm glad I got the response from you guys too, that you thought it was as interesting as I do. That whole almost kind of conspiracy theory about the development of the weekend and entertainment in the Gilded Age. I plan to definitely read up more on that. All right. So yeah, don't forget about your quiz. I will post in the meantime, like I said, it's unlimited. I will post an attachment of the quiz itself. All right, Chris. And yeah, and so anything else, just let me know via a Canvas message if you would, okay?
Okay, thank you. I found it pretty funny you called me out there.
Sorry. No, I just wanted to make sure you that you knew I was listening to you, and I'll do whatever I
totally
can to help you
understand.
out.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem. All right. All right. So if that's it, you guys, we'll go ahead and call it a week. We'll call it a day. You will definitely get your extra credit for this. You've earned it. And I hope those of you who are able to watch this and with it posted shortly, that it helps give you context for the test and for whatever number that you're choosing. Okay. All right. So you
Yeah,
guys
thank
have a
you.
good week. Okay.
Thank you
Me
so
too.
much.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one question if you're still there.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so because I didn't have the first one, I noticed that you gave the sample, the reconstruction assignment. So were we supposed which one were we supposed to write on that one? As I'm going to finish that tonight, and it seems like your sample response was exactly like what you're looking for in number
Yeah.
3. Anyway.
So if you would, Polly, do number 3, okay?
The reconstruction failed because it didn't squash racism?
That's right.
Oh, do that one. Okay.
Yes, please. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
I just make sure because I saw the change and I didn't know, I wasn't online at the time, and I want to make sure I had the right one downloaded.
no, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah,
All
so
right.
please number 3 on that one. Thank you, hon.
Okay, thank you so much. Have a great week.
You as well, okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you. Bye, you guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.